Sure, we help build IoT companies, these connected type of technologies. So we have an accelerator, a manufacturing studio in China, and a distribution and growth team that helps these new types of entrepreneurs scale their companies globally. The dream for the world is that these devices, there'll be so many of them all over the planet, that it starts unlocking the data that's all over the place. I mean, one obvious thing is our bodies. So unlocking the data in our health. After we have that data, so we'll have to have millions and tens of millions of these devices, then we can start understanding the data and improving the world around us in our life. So we really see a future, and we hope that we can help build a future where founders get to have these ideas and then survive all the challenges of manufacturing and distribution and building a consumer brand. So we do everything we can to help them do that. It's very different. It's pretty much the most different there can be. So with IoT, you have to have both the hardware and the software. So it's that much more difficult because you have to be great at software and you have to learn and work really hard to understand the old economy. One of the biggest things that we find with founders is they have a challenge with taking the old economy and the new economy, or offline and online, and marrying that. We kind of go another dimension and say there's East and West. Because if you're making these products, you generally are going to have to be in Asia, where we are, in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, because that's where all these consumer electronics are manufactured. So it's very challenging. Software, when you have some data or feedback, you can just on the fly, you can change. So you can just update the software, redeploy, update to the App Store. The problem in hardware is it's very much the old economy. We call it waterfall businesses, where you make a decision today and then you build on top of that decision, then you build on top of that decision. So in hardware, when you make a decision saying, I'm going to finalize my specification and I'm going to hit manufacture, hit the go button, you then aren't going to know for probably 2 years whether you did it right or wrong. And that's really hard, so you have to do as much homework at the beginning. We really focus on customer development and customer discovery, because in hardware, once you say, yes, I want to go spend the money and tell them to manufacture this, your price point better be right, the feature set better be right, the design better be right. It's so hard to go back in time once you've said go on production. So it's just a little bit different way of thinking than maybe this new generation. So we actually have found a lot of corporates spinning out innovation type of hubs and even teams and companies, and a lot of older innovators and entrepreneurs, because they understand the old economy and they understand how this might work. So I'm seeing a very interesting new trend come up right now. Yeah, so I did work at Apple for 6 years. I was lucky enough to start with them in college even. So I was able to work in the education department, then the small to medium business department, and then I created my own division where we helped founders and VCs and entrepreneurs. But I think really operations, that's my thing. I figured out, how do you become an unbelievable operator with the level of precision that Apple expects on a daily basis. And that's one of my favorite things to instill and build into my companies in our portfolio, is you need to execute at the highest level possible, because the market and the world doesn't care about your idea. And I think a lot of people can get lazy, and at Apple I learned just how serious and how perfect everything has to be all the time. And so I do my very best every day to instill that into our portfolio. So failure is okay, right? That's not a bad thing. I think the challenge is, I think there's two sides. It's not okay to have a really bad strategy. Like, you shouldn't fail. What's up? You shouldn't fail because you didn't think through your problem, right? So hardware companies, in a lot of ways, they get in trouble because they don't plan far enough in advance and they take a software attitude. That's a bad decision. It's like, you can control that. But there's a lot of reasons, even if you have a great strategy, a great team, great investors, all these good things, you can still fail because maybe the market didn't work out correctly, or maybe a big corporate decided to enter your territory. That's okay. But it's not okay to fail for reasons you can control. And so I think that a lot of people just say, oh my gosh, I don't want to start because I might not do well, I might fail. It's okay. So yeah, I had a failure company. My first company we worked on blew up. The second company we sold. And then the third company, funny enough, I shut it down, but 10 years later, I've taken the intellectual property and put it into one of my new investments. So you can never know what might happen. Ideas can come back around again. Oh man. Probably the best thing that's ever happened, it happens consistently, is when I see one of my founders succeed. Like that never gets old. That's actually the most addicting thing ever. One of my passions is helping other people figure out whatever their dream is and then go achieve that. So it happens all the time, and that's why I do what I do. I think the downside is, frankly, when I feel like I can control something, which I'm obviously a control freak, I'm into operations, and then I realize that I can't. That's very irritating, because I try my very best to systematically decrease risk. The worst for me is when a team fails, because the people fail. It's a very personal thing, and I never want someone to have to go through that. But yeah, that never feels good. So I think it's probably the same on both sides. It never gets old to have your teams do well, and it never feels good when they don't. In 5 years, I'll definitely be in Asia still. I moved from San Francisco. I was there for almost 10 years. But in Asia, I've learned everything is changing at a speed, and the pace of innovation is incredible. And so I'm learning every day, and I really think that the future is going to be made in Asia. So we're going to continue to be there. My wife and I love it. The culture is so different. The speed of the lifestyle is so fun. We'll probably go back to the West at some point, but definitely the next 5 years, probably even maybe 10 years, we think Asia is really the future. So we'll be there. Yeah, all private. That's actually one of our main strategies. So when we talk to our teams, our portfolio, we tell them the same thing. We always say eat our own dog food, right? Like we actually do what we say we are going to do as the same things we teach. So we have some investors, but they're not controlling it all. They're very passive. There's no LPs. We control the entire company, because as this world evolves, especially this new type of IoT connected hardware, it's brand new. So you can't select a business model right now, because in 2 years it might be different. And the problem is when you take a bunch of money, you have to follow that pattern. And so we tell our teams the same thing. That's actually one of my talks when I'm going around Europe the next 2 weeks, is why hardware companies should not take VC money. Because you don't know for years. And if you tell them you're gonna do one thing and then you can't do it, you can't pivot. So yeah, we control everything. We're quite flexible. We're open-minded to working in any capacity. As long as it makes sense for the founders and us, we're happy to. Okay, Asia's crazy, in a good way. So it's massive, right? So 4 of the 5 largest global economies will be in Asia by the end of the decade. So it's huge, it's unbelievably massive. One really interesting dynamic, let's say in China in particular, is that when the country gets behind an idea, they can shift an entire country to do something like mobile payments. Apple Pay has started there, but they've already been pushing Alipay, and they have gotten it across the country at a speed that you can never see in the West. So there's an interesting dynamic when a country decides to do something versus individual businesses. One thing also that people really underestimate is the talent. The talent is incredible in Asia. Also, the cost is quite cheap, but you can't just hire someone on the internet. You need to go there. You need to meet with them and talk with them and figure it out. But we see teams scaling like 10x versus hiring in San Francisco. I always scratch my head a little bit, having lived there. It's like, well, you're going to have 100 employees in San Francisco at that salary versus you could have 500 employees in Asia just as talented. So it's a little interesting. I think people misconstrue that sometimes. But Hungary, incredibly talented. Going back to Hungary, they'll probably work harder than any other country on the entire planet. Like Asian entrepreneurs kill themselves to succeed. So anyone in the West, you better watch out.